Wow, what a week it's been. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was an attempted coup to prevent uh, the election from happening and to prevent the transfer of power. And this week, we actually saw the completion of an entire election cycle. And now we have a new president. And that is going to signal such a change in just how we do business and how we exist as Americans. And so I want to take the episode this time around and talk about that that transition that we're going through and highlight specifically the idea of a transfer of power. You know, when you think about it, the peaceful transfer of power is something that has happened. We've had the opportunity to have that happen every 4 years since the first president was elected, and often we've retained the same president, and so we've been through this process many times, and for most Americans, we just take it for granted. We just assume that, of course, there's going to be an election. That election is going to be free and is going to be, it's going to have some moderate amount of corruption, but in the end, the American people will be able to decide who our next leader is going to be, and then we get another chance every 4 years to choose our leaders. And this is something that I've grown up with this, and just took that as something that is granted, something that is just a part of normal everyday life. But for me, I had the unique opportunity to experience a dictatorship when I was just a child. When I was 10 years old, we lived in Athens, Greece for a year. And at that time, the country was being ruled by a military junta that had deposed the king, and the colonels in the army rose up and they put forward a dictator that had secret police that worked for him, and people disappeared on a regular basis in the middle of the night. They lived in constant fear, and it was a very formative experience. So even at 10 years old, I knew that this is not the way that government should be done. I knew that people should not be in a position to fear their government. And yet that's been the reality of most of human history, and is the reality in many places in the world. What we have here is precious. What we have here is a nation where most of the population does not fear the government, and there are no secret police that just arrest you in the middle of the night and you just disappear and are never heard from again. So I treasure freedom at a level that I think most Americans don't, just because of that experience. That has colored how I see the government, how I see the role of the government in our lives, and also the potential that things could go really wrong. Although in the past, I've never really believed that anything really bad could happen to the United States. I never really believed that a dictator could arise and could take control of the government and could enforce his will against the will of the people, because I thought the system was just rigged to prevent that from happening. But over the last few years, I've grown increasingly alarmed at our sacrifice of basic freedoms in the interest of security. I used to always believe that America would be free, but now I think that's something that needs to be actively protected if we do want to enjoy those freedoms in the future. And last week, we saw a true test of that happening. It really was triggered by the president's unwillingness to accept the results of the election, and then there was a rebellion fomented, and there was an uh, attempted mob break-in of the Capitol in order to prevent democracy from actually happening. And and quite frankly, we came to the brink of something really bad happening, where the transfer of power had the potential to break down. This is a test for us. This is a true test of whether our democracy will stand, of whether we will have free elections in the future. And I'm happy to say, I'm thrilled to say that on the other side of the inauguration, I can say for certain that that the United States has passed that test, and that we will go on peacefully, and that there will be a new government in place, and that no one at this point can actually prevent that from happening. But quite frankly, I was sitting on pins and needles waiting for something really bad to happen, either immediately before or after the inauguration, or maybe even during it. Widespread terrorist attacks on state capitals, and watching the inauguration and seeing all of the security and everything, it was really weird, because it felt like I was looking at England in wartime, where everyone was hunkered down and just braced for the ultimate bad thing to happen. But now on the other side of that, I am just so excited that we have passed the test. We will have a free country. We will have elections of our leaders, and that no one at this point can stop anything like that from happening. So I am so thrilled to announce that this is the time for a new era. We have seen a successful and the most contested transfer of power that there's ever been in our nation's history. There's never been a place where a sitting president did refuse to go, and so we're breaking new ground here, as we have been over the last few years consistently. So now we have a new leader, and so that is the signal that a new era is about to begin. And I am so excited. I am so eager for the new to begin. The most important person in the world, person with the most power, the most influence, that can sway the entire world one way or another, is the president of the United States. There's no one in the world that comes anywhere close to the power that the president has. And so also the most significant nation on earth right now, the most significant superpower is America. And so what happens in America dictates the quality of life for most of the rest of the world. And so as America goes, so goes the world. And so we are at a threshold in this country that is ushering in a new era. And that new era is not just going to be for the United States. That new era is going to affect the entire world. And so let that era begin, because we really need to get on to the recovery. We are in a series of crises. There is not just one crisis, but there are many crises that are smashing down on us, and we're having crises along environmental, social, political, economic, health. We have all of these things. We are experiencing more severe problems than we have seen for the last 100 years. You would have to go all the way back to World War II and the Great Depression, which was a global catastrophe related to the world economy. So you had World War II, which was a global political catastrophe, and you had the economic upheaval of the Great Depression. So combine those two things, and you have a situation that's actually worse than the one that we're facing right now. But we cannot minimize how difficult the problems that we're facing are going to be to solve. And we need all of us to work together. This is not a time for sectarian partisanship. This is a time where we begin to lay down the things that separate us, the things that prevent cooperation, and rise to the challenge of the problems that are facing us right now. And the most important problem I believe that we are facing as a society, and ultimately as a world, is we have got to protect the most vulnerable. And right now, if you're in, say, the upper half of the population, you're probably doing okay. But if you're in the lower half, you're extremely vulnerable to everything that's going on. And these crises that are impinging on us are hitting those that are most vulnerable the hardest. They're hitting children, they're hitting elderly, they're hitting the poor, they're hitting the they're hitting ethnic groups that are not white much harder than they are hitting the white folks. So the challenge before us is, how are we going to protect our most vulnerable citizens? As I talk about a new era, this for me is a time of enormous hope. Yes, the problems before us are very difficult, but I have hope for America, probably for the first time in several years. Uh, and I just kind of want to talk through that. One of the biggest problems that is impinging us, or that is affecting every decision that we make as a nation, is there's a strong sense of nationalism and authoritarianism. That's not just in the United States. This is a worldwide, global problem that we have. It's all over in many countries. They're experiencing nationalism that is on the rise and is affecting all of the decisions that get made. And I want to generalize this idea of nationalism to include all of the strong divisions that separate us. So that's divisions of class and culture, race, gender, and generation. And I think these things are the 5 issues that are driving how we make decisions, and that are driving who gets to share in the wealth and power in our society. And so, if we are going to survive, we must come together. If we are going to survive, we must begin to bridge these gaps of culture, race, religion, gender, all of that stuff. It has to be addressed. And the idea of protecting me and mine is what is going to cause us to either not solve the problems, or to solve them in such a slow manner that so many extra people are going to suffer as a result. So now is the time to act. Now is the time to put down our differences and to begin building bridges across all of these great divides. Um, and I think what has really become apparent to me over the last few years is I think we've lost our way. I think we've lost the ethic that we once had to protect the vulnerable and the weak. And we as a nation have become incredibly selfish, and we've forgotten about the weak and the vulnerable. We must turn this around. And we must turn this around for our own survival, in addition to the survival of those that are most vulnerable among us. So this is a moment of reckoning. And this is a time where we really have to choose a better path. And so I think, so my hope is founded in the idea that many of us have been through such suffering over the last year that we're actually ready to turn this corner, that we're actually ready to do something that is redemptive, something that is healing. And we have experienced such fatigue at the hands of our leaders that I think there's a general outcry for something that is a better life. And I think it's going to be caught up in having an attitude that is more embracing of all people. The old world is dead. I mean, look any direction. Look at our institutions. Look at our businesses. Look at our government. Look at our education system. Look at healthcare. It's all dead. It's not working. The systems have failed, and now we are in a position to innovate. In the past, there has been such vested interest in protecting the existing systems that it was very difficult to make change. The old world is dead now. Now is the time to make a better one that we want to live in and that works for more people. So I'm hoping, and I hope that you're hoping, and I hope this resonates with you, that I want to have a nation that is kinder and gentler. I want to have a nation that is where justice is more available to more people, and ultimately where we hold our leaders accountable, where when we get leaders that are corrupt and that are harmful, that we get rid of them, and that leaders must act on behalf of the American people. And so my belief in the new world order is going to be, it has to have a mechanism to get rid of old leaders that are not choosing to be accountable. And I think, quite frankly, I think we've done that recently. And so that's what gives me hope for this new world. But now is the time when we begin the hard work. And this is not going to be easy. And no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And so, so my advice is relax and detach. Relax means try to let go of the anger and the fear and the belief that it's all going to burn, and try to detach, recognizing that we don't have all the answers yet, but somehow, some way, we're going to figure it out, and we're going to work together, and we're going to build a world, and it's not going to be bad. In fact, I believe the world that we build in the future, starting now, is going to be far superior to the world that we left behind in 2019. So focus on what you can control. So don't focus on the things that bring fear and anger. Instead, just think about what things that you can do in your life that that will make a difference. And acting generously is always a good idea. Acting generously to your neighbors, to your community, to your school, to your healthcare providers, and just find ways to extend generosity to others, and that's exactly what we all need. In the end, we're going to have to address the equity issue, because so much of America, it works for some, but increasingly very few. And there's so many people that are suffering, and they're suffering so greatly. We must figure out a way to make our nation more equitable for more people, so more people can share in the benefits. We want prosperity to be everywhere. And now's the time to begin sacrificing for the benefit of others. Um, and my personal commitment is I'm going to be seeking ways that I can confront both prejudice and privilege, because I think the time to speak truth to power is now. I think holding our leaders accountable and asking for a better world is really important. But if we're going to make this thing work, we are going to have to be able to distinguish between propaganda and between legitimate, thoughtful discourse. So much of what we've been subjected to over the last few years is the hysteria of bumper sticker slogans that are all about creating emotion that is devoid of any factual basis. So everything from out lies to heavily stinted, selective disclosure of facts, that we've got to figure out a way to silence that. We have got to figure out who the deep thinkers are and learn how to begin following the advice of the deep thinkers. This is important to our survival. And I believe that we also really need to engage in this struggle for justice. We've got to move justice beyond the rich and the powerful. We've got to allow people to have lives, and we must confront and undo the unjust policies, practices, and ultimately laws that govern our nation. And to do that individually, what we can always do is highlight instances of injustice and hold our leaders accountable. And then for me personally, I've been on a journey to really look at the ugly truths that are part of our national history. And so I've really struggled over the last year to look at the issue of slavery and genocide, and to really understand what I can do to right those wrongs. And so, I invite you to do the same thing, and to really think about what would it look like to have a world, to have a society that didn't have those things as part of its history, and to be a part of the redemptive history for moving forward. I have a dream. And in that dream, I believe that all people should be able to live. I believe all people should be free of a fear for their lives, and for becoming imprisoned, or for being attacked, or accused of things. That I just have a fundamental belief that all people should have freedom from that fear. I also believe that all people should be able to eat, to have a job, and to have a house, a place to live. And then on top of that, all people should have health care and education. And if you look at just these group of attributes, and you look at what percentage of Americans can claim to have these things, it's a decreasing number, and it's surprisingly low. And I think that's my dream. My dream is that all people should be able to just have these things as a fundamental guarantee. And again, I want to bring back this issue. The only way we're going to get there is when we demand this of our leaders, because these things are not going to happen spontaneously. These things are going to happen because there is a widespread outcry for these basic human rights. And ultimately, if we're going to solve these problems, we must address these 5 things that separate us, these 5 things that divide us into groups where there's haves and have-nots. We must address these things if we are going to make it forward. And then I just want to give you this one parting thought. We stand at the door of the future. The eyes of history are on us. We stand at a threshold. What we do here matters. What we do over the next year, over the next 5 years, it matters, and it matters a lot. I've read quite a bit of history, and I'm often just befuddled when I read history and I see why people did things that they did. And I struggle to understand, why was that such a big issue? And as history evaluates us and what we do next, there are some issues that people are going to struggle to understand. The children in their history classes 100 years from now will probably really struggle to try to understand what's the difference between a red state and a blue state. They're probably going to really struggle to understand conservatives versus liberals, and all of the rhetoric that is so near and dear to us now. But they're just not going to get it. But the moral issues of our time will be crystal clear. And so I want to invite all of us to choose to be on the right side of history. Because when you read about this time, 100 years from now, there will be a right and a wrong side of history. And it's very critical that we choose to be on the right side of history. And to be that, we need to be a moral people. And specifically, we need to protect the most vulnerable among us, because I believe that history will judge us. And I know that there's a better world, and today is the first day that we can commit ourselves to that pursuit.